Hello and welcome to Vantage This Week, a show where we recap the highlights of the week gone by. Another war is looming over West Asia. Israel has carried out 2 strikes. It struck Lebanon and Iran and killed senior leaders of Hezbollah and Hamas. It's a dramatic escalation. We'll discuss what happened and what this means for West Asia and the world. In the UK, a brutal stabbing has shaken the nation. 3 children were killed in the town of Southport. 8 others were left injured. And this has led to anti-Muslim riots in the country. In Africa's most populous country, Nigeria, after weeks of build-up, a nationwide protest against the government has begun. Why are angry Nigerians taking to the streets? All this and more lined up for you. Let's get started. West Asia is on the brink of another war. The entire region is in chaos. In the last 24 hours, we have seen a dramatic escalation. Israel has struck 2 countries, Lebanon and Iran. Both strikes have been in the capital cities, Beirut in Lebanon and Tehran in Iran. In Beirut, a top Hezbollah commander is believed to have been killed. In Tehran, a top Hamas leader has been killed. Israel is said to be behind both these attacks. Needless to say, the situation is tense and precarious. We've been telling you about this. In fact, yesterday we discussed how an Israeli attack on Lebanon was imminent. And it happened within hours of our report. Israel struck Beirut in an act of revenge for what happened on Saturday. There was an attack in the Golan Heights on Saturday, reportedly by Hezbollah in Lebanon. 12 Israeli children died in that attack. So Israel was expected to strike back, and it did. But it's the operation in Tehran that has taken everyone by surprise. It was designed to take out this man, Ismail Haniyeh, the political chief of Hamas. Just hours before his death, he was with Iran's top leadership. In fact, he was in Tehran for the swearing in of the new president, Masoud Pezeshkian, the new president of Iran. So Haniyeh met President Pezeshkian. He also met the Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, and he was spotted at the Iranian parliament. It's a close association. Hamas, after all, is a proxy group of Iran. Its top leaders are protected by Tehran. So Haniyeh's killing means that Iranian defenses were compromised. A top Hamas leader was taken out on their watch, and that too in the heart of Tehran. Ismail Haniyeh should have been safe there. He ended up being killed. The details of the attacks are still sketchy. Here's what we know so far. This attack happened at 2 a.m. local time. It was an airstrike. Haniyeh was in northern Tehran. He was staying in government accommodation at a home built for Iranian veterans. And he wasn't alone. His bodyguard was with him. The airstrike killed both of them. Soon after the news broke, Haniyeh's daughter-in-law sent out this message from Gaza.
With hearts satisfied with God's judgment and destiny, I mourn a man whose name fills up the earth and sky upon being mentioned. May God reward us in our misfortune and grant us better situations. The pain is great.
Iran and Hamas have blamed Israel for his death. Officially, Israel is not claiming responsibility. They never have. Israel rarely takes responsibility for any operation behind enemy lines. But the reactions of Israeli leaders give it away. Several Israeli ministers have spoken about this assassination, and look at what they're saying. Haniyeh's death makes the world a little better. I'm quoting. Right way to clear the world from this filth. These are Israeli ministers. Yes, all your enemies will perish, O God. And finally, we have this. Careful what you wish for. Israeli citizens are also celebrating.
I think the assassination of Haniyeh is a great news, and I think it was supposed to happen, and I hope Sinwar will be next.
think it's good news, both the assassination of Haniyeh and the assassination of the number 2 of Hezbollah yesterday. It's good news for Israel.
Israel says it has no new operations planned, but today's events change everything. Ismail Haniyeh was leading the Gaza ceasefire talks for Hamas. Those negotiations are now dead. More importantly, how would Iran respond to what has happened? It's a serious provocation for them. Their sovereignty has been breached. So the regime wants to respond in kind. Iran's supreme leader sent a warning to Israel today. The Iranian press relayed a message from him.
The criminal and terrorist Zionist regime with this action has prepared the ground for a harsh punishment for itself, and we consider it our duty to avenge the blood of him who was martyred in the land of Islamic Republic of Iran. Iran
says it will avenge Haniyeh's death. It will observe 3 days of national mourning. The funeral will be held in Tehran. Then Haniyeh's remains will be flown to Qatar, where he will be buried. There is outrage on the streets of Tehran. Supporters of the regime took out a march chanting death to Israel.
Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! Akbar Israel! Akbar Israel! Allahu Akbar! Akbar America! Akbar America! Rahbar azade amade.
So the Iranians are angry. It will be very hard for the regime to let this go, and a lot will depend on their response. The region is bracing for impact. There's growing tension across the board, especially in the West Bank, where Palestinian groups have called a protest. Regional stakeholders are all nervous. World leaders are weighing in, starting with the United States here. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is still stressing on a ceasefire in Gaza.
Of course, I've seen the reports, and all I can tell you right now is I think nothing takes away from the importance of, as I said a moment ago, getting to the ceasefire.
Well, America could not sound more disconnected from reality. Meanwhile, China and Russia have condemned the Israeli operation.
It is clear that the organizers of this political assassination were aware of the dangerous consequences of this action for the entire region.
Qatar, Jordan and Lebanon have also slammed Israel, as have the Houthis in Yemen. Just like Hamas, the Houthis are also backed by Iran. Now, what remains to be seen is this. Will Tehran mobilize its proxies to respond, or will it attack Israel directly? Whatever they choose, West Asia is plunging into a wider conflict. Striking one enemy capital is risky enough, but Israel has struck two. Before hitting Tehran, they hit Beirut, the capital of Lebanon. Israel had blamed Hezbollah for an airstrike on Golan Heights, an attack that killed 12 children. So a response was always on the cards. The only question was the scale. Would Israel strike deep inside Lebanon, or would they target the border regions with Israel? Well, we have the answer. Beirut is as deep as it gets. The airstrike hit a southern suburb of the city, an area which Hezbollah controls. It's also a very populated part of the city of Beirut. Projectiles hit an apartment building in the area. Officials say it was located just a few meters from a major hospital. And it wasn't a random airstrike. It was a targeted attack on a top Hezbollah commander. His name is Fuad Shukr. Israel says he plotted the Golan attack.
Fuad Shukr was the right-hand man to Hassan Nasrallah, Hezbollah's leader and his advisor in planning and directing attacks and operations. Fuad Shukr was the commander responsible for the Majd al-Shams massacre, in which 12 children were murdered after Hezbollah fired an Iranian Falak 1 rocket directly at a soccer field in northern Israel on Saturday evening.
Shukur's body has been found from the rubble. There was some confusion about his death earlier. At first, Hezbollah sources claimed that he had survived the strike, but now it looks like he did not. So Israel's operation was successful. But who exactly was this commander? Fuad Shukr was part of the Hezbollah's Jihad Council. It's the group's top military body. He was also in charge of their weapons, your precision rockets, anti-ship missiles, and long-range rockets. All of it was acquired by Fuad Shukr. He was also linked to a deadly attack in 1983. Terrorists had bombed US and French forces in Beirut back in 1983. Almost 300 soldiers were killed in that attack. The US says Shukr plotted it. So he was a key member in the Hezbollah hierarchy. And now he's dead. Israel's strike also killed 3 civilians. Among them were 2 children, a 10-year-old boy and a 6-year-old girl. Just think about the irony. Israel's strike was all about avenging the death of 12 children, but in the process, they killed 2 more. That's what war is. It's not about getting justice. It's about inflicting pain. The question is, what will be the fallout of this strike? Israel says it's not keen to carry on. For them, this was a tit-for-tat attack. You hit us, we hit back. So now we are square.
The performance tonight in Beirut was focused, high quality, and limited. We don't want war, but we are preparing for all possibilities, and within that you have to prepare properly, and we will do our job at all levels above you.
We don't want war. That's the message from Israel, but Hezbollah will not see it that way. In public, they have denied carrying out the Golan attack. The Hezbollah have denied carrying out the attack in Israel. So for them, this is not a response. This is a provocation. Hezbollah leaders are lashing out at Israel. They say they are ready for war.
This confirms 2 things. 1, that this enemy demands war and we are up for it, God willing. We are up for it, God willing. And it confirms another thing, that we will continue as a country, people, resistance and battlefront against the Israeli enemy to take up our duties in full, to confront it and prevent it from achieving its goals through this attack.
The target is key here. Hezbollah knew that an attack was coming. So did Lebanese government officials, but they got the target wrong. Hezbollah thought Israel would hit their southern strongholds, maybe sites near the border, but Israel went deep. They targeted a top leader in the Lebanese capital. That's Israel's way of sending a message, sort of like saying, we can hit you anywhere. But is there appetite for more, for a wider war? Well, that depends on the Hezbollah now. Chances are they will respond to this attack. But again, it's a question of how. How will they respond? Will they stick to Israel's border regions or will they strike Israeli cities? They certainly have the capabilities. This year, Hezbollah released 3 drone videos of Israel. One shows the port of Haifa. The other shows Golan Heights, and the third shows the Ramat military base. It's located around 50 kilometers inside Israeli territory. Now, the point of these videos is quite simple, to showcase capability, to demonstrate that Hezbollah can get drones deep inside Israel. It can shoot strategic sites and then return safely. That was the idea behind these videos. But will they choose this risky option? Let's hope they don't. Most countries have urged both sides to de-escalate, and that includes Israel's ally, the US.
We do not want to see an escalation. We do not want to see an all-out war. It is important for the people of Israel. It is important for the Lebanese people to live in safety, to get back to their homes, and that's what we want to see.
Escalation or not, one thing is quite clear. New red lines have been drawn. Until this year, Iran and Israel only fought shadow wars. But now they're striking directly. Same with Israel and Hezbollah. Israel last struck Beirut in 2006. It was during the Israel-Hezbollah war, 2006. But October 7th changed the equation. In January this year, Israel took out a Hamas official in Beirut, and months later, they have struck again. So war or not, Israel has just upped the stakes. So Wall Street is a bit shaky, and a big reason for that is chip companies, your Intels and Nvidias. They're all part of the same race, the race to produce artificial intelligence chips, AI chips. But some have had more success than others. Just look at Intel. They dominate computer chips. Around 69% of all CPUs use an Intel chip. But when it comes to AI chips, Intel is way behind. NVIDIA and AMD are the companies in the lead here. So Intel has a plan to turn things around, and the first step is cutting cost. No surprises how. Intel is laying off people. The company is cutting 15% of its workforce, which is around 15,000 jobs. They're going to lay off 15,000 people. Listen to how the CEO explained his decision. And I'm quoting from what he said. Our revenues have not grown as expected, and we are yet to fully benefit from powerful trends like AI. Our costs are too high. Our margins are too low. It's like ChatGPT wrote this. But will this be enough to bail Intel out? Well, the CEO is right about one thing. Intel is bleeding money. They lost $1.6 billion in the second quarter and $437 million in the first quarter. Compare this to their main rival, which is NVIDIA. NVIDIA made $14.8 billion in the first quarter. So the fortunes are very, very different. The question is why? Intel and NVIDIA have one major difference. NVIDIA only designs chips. Intel also produces them. And the production business is the one that is eating up money. Last year, they lost $7 billion in manufacturing chips. That's a problem that NVIDIA does not have. They simply design advanced AI chips. The production of these chips is usually done in other countries like Japan or South Korea or Taiwan by other companies. But Intel is not giving up. They're not abandoning their manufacturing business. They're doubling down on it, in fact, mainly because of the US government. In 2022, US President Joe Biden introduced what's called the CHIPS Act. It set aside around $50 billion for American chip makers, $50 billion. The idea was quite simple: make America a chip-making powerhouse. Now, Intel has benefited from this program. They've got $8.5 billion in direct funding, plus $11 billion in cheap loans. And what does Intel plan to do with this money? Well, they plan to set up factories around America. So the company has a long-term plan here. First, focus more on manufacturing chips. And second, latch on to the US campaign, which brings us to Intel's rivals. What are they planning to do? NVIDIA is riding high on confidence, but it could be a bumpy road ahead. Just look at the last 1 month. First, NVIDIA shares lost $430 billion in a sell-off. Then they gained $329 billion in a single day. So the AI journey will not be linear. Much like any industry, it will have its ups and downs. Let's look at some more numbers. NVIDIA shares are 11% down in the last 1 month. But they're 65% up if you look at the last 6 months. Same with AMD. The shares are 20% down in the last 1 month, but 20% up compared to August last year. So expect a similar trajectory going forward. There are two reasons for this. One is demand. Every tech company is looking for AI chips, and they have paid billions of dollars to the likes of NVIDIA and AMD, but the returns are yet to come. Consider OpenAI, the poster boy of AI companies. They are projected to lose $5 billion this year. They could run out of cash by 2025. Now, the rule of economics is quite clear. You need returns on your investment. If not, you will look elsewhere. And right now, the AI bet has not started making money. Maybe it will by the end of this decade, but that requires tech firms to stick with it. And that's a big if. Factor number 2 is politics. Reports say Joe Biden will announce a new trade policy soon. It will curb chip imports from China. At the same time, it will exempt imports from allied nations like Japan or South Korea or the Netherlands. So we could soon have two camps in this industry. There's going to be a Chinese camp and a Western one. And those tensions will also affect the AI race. So these are volatile times for chip firms. They're still refining their strategies, seeing what works for them, and adjusting to political realities. There will be ups and downs in the stock prices. If you're brave, you can cash in. Let's turn to Britain now. The country's ugly truth has been laid bare. All those years of multiculturalism, all those decades of preaching secularism, but it's all coming crashing down. We told you about the recent stabbing in Southport. 3 children were killed in a holiday club. 8 others were left injured. It was a truly horrible crime. But do you know how some Britons responded to it? By attacking the Southport Mosque. They damaged the building, they torched police vehicles and assaulted police officers. Protests were also held in other parts of the country. In London, things got violent. Clashes broke out near Downing Street. Protesters threw flares and beer cans at the Prime Minister's residence. Some of them also had a slogan, "Stop the boats." It's a reference to migrants crossing the English Channel. A popular right-wing chant. Take a look.
This way! He's a 6 feet long
So let's recap the past few days. The stabbing happened on Monday. A mosque was targeted on Tuesday and protesters chanted "Stop the boats" on Wednesday. I know what you're thinking. The knife man must have been a Muslim migrant. Except he wasn't. He is a 17-year-old born to Rwandan parents in Cardiff in the UK. So neither a migrant nor a Muslim.
A 17-year-old boy from Banks has been charged with the murders of Bibi, Elsie Dot and Alice. 10 counts of attempted murder and possession of a bladed article following the tragic incident in Southport on Monday, the 29th of July.
He appeared in court today. Normally his name would not be released to public because he is underage, 17 years old, but the judge made an exception in this case. So we can tell you the name of the knife man, Alex Ruda Kubana. He stabbed and killed 3 children in a holiday club. And what was Britain's first reaction? To blame Muslims and migrants. This is blatant Islamophobia. It's the definition of prejudice, and social media contributed to it. Many users spread lies about the attacker's identity. They claimed that he was Muslim. They claimed that he arrived on a boat in 2023. No evidence, no confirmation from the police, just casual hate mongering. And shame on these protesters too. You don't become Islamophobic overnight. Chances are you always were. This attack was just an opportunity to act on it, to attack and vandalize mosques. So these riots were not a sudden outburst. They reveal a deeper problem. I have some numbers for you. Let's look at the period from October to February. The UK recorded more than 2,000 anti-Muslim incidents, 2,000. The year before, this number was 600. So this is a 235% rise in 1 year. Some of it was triggered by the Israel-Hamas war. But like I said, Islamophobia does not happen overnight. It's the product of years of fear-mongering. And British politicians must take some of the blame. I'll give you an example. Nigel Farage leads the Reform UK party. His platform is anti-immigration. Listen to his statement on Tuesday.
I have to say there are one or two questions. Was this guy being monitored by the security services? Some reports say he was, others less sure. The police say it's a non-terror incident. I just wonder whether the truth is being withheld from us. I don't know the answer to that, but I think it is a fair and legitimate question.
That's the definition of dog whistling. He wonders whether the police are lying about the attacker. Well, such wonderings lead to violence. They fuel hate and divide communities, and it's not just Britain. We've seen this elsewhere in the West. Economy not performing, blame the migrants. Crime on the rise, blame the Muslims. Inflation out of control, divert attention by talking about immigration. This is Western politics in a nutshell. But nobody questions them. We are told that Western countries are secular by definition. Hate politics is only for Asia or Latin America. Well, think again. A diverse population has exposed these societies. Look at what happened in France. They wanted a black pop star to sing at the Olympics opening ceremony. Her name is Aya Nakamura. She was born in Mali, but she grew up in Paris. So she is a French singer. But some people couldn't stand it. Politicians and senators pushed back at the choice. They couldn't fathom the idea of a black French singer. This was always the reality of Western society. These latest instances have simply exposed them. If you've been tracking the Olympics, you must have seen this story. It is not about medals, it's not about a new record, it's about an athlete's gender. Here's what happened. A round of 16 boxing match was underway on Thursday. Italy's Angela Carini versus Algeria's Imane Khalif. The match lasted just 46 seconds. Khalif landed some brutal blows in the opening seconds, so Carini threw in the towel. The Italian broke down later. She said she'd never been punched like this. So what exactly happened here? Well, Khalif had failed the gender test last year, so she is being called a trans woman, someone who was born male and later transitioned to a woman. You can see why this is worrying. Suppose a person has been through male puberty, they have longer arms, they have bigger muscles or longer legs. So when they transition to being a woman, they retain some of those advantages. And we are not the ones saying this. World Athletics admitted this in their report, which is why letting trans women compete in women's sports is so controversial. The argument is that it's unfair. So everyone jumped into this controversy. Elon Musk, J.K. Rowling, Donald Trump, all of them, even Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, all of them said that a man had beaten up a woman. Now, I know this is a sensitive issue. So first, let's look at the facts. Is Imane Khalif a trans woman? The fact is that she is not. There are no transgender athletes at the Paris Olympics. Khalif was born a woman. She has female reproductive organs, and she has always participated in events for women. Let's also look at her track record. In 2018, she took part in the Women's World Boxing Championship. She finished 17th. In 2021, she took part in the Tokyo Olympics. She was knocked out in the quarters. In 2022, she participated in the Istanbul Women's World Championship, where she finished second. It was only last year that her gender was questioned. Khalif was disqualified from the 2023 World Championship, which is organized by the IBA, the International Boxing Association. They disqualified her. And why was she disqualified? Because of a medical test. The IBA has not released the complete details yet, but one official said that Khalif had male chromosome combination. What does that mean? Men have XY chromosomes, women have XX chromosomes. And the IBA said that Khalif had the XY combination. So she and another boxer were both disqualified. Then how is she competing in Paris? Because the IBA is not recognized by the Olympic Association. So the rules in Paris are different. They look at the gender on the passport. And they also have their own medical tests. So the organizers say that this controversy is completely baseless.
These two athletes were the victims of a sudden and arbitrary decision by the IBA. Towards the end of the IBA World Championships in 2023, they were suddenly disqualified without any due process. The current aggression against these two athletes is based entirely on this arbitrary decision, which was taken without any proper procedure, especially considering that these athletes had been competing in top-level competition for many years.
Let's focus on the medical angle now. Why does Khalif have XY chromosomes? It's a rare condition involving genes and hormones. You may have heard of testosterone. Women are also capable of producing testosterone, but in very small quantities. Except in some women, it is different. Their bodies naturally produce more testosterone, and those women may not fit the society's definition of a woman. And that's the controversy here, basically. Should such women be allowed in female sports? There are two camps here, two sets of arguments. One camp says, what is the problem? Athletes always benefit from natural advantages. Some are taller than others, some have longer limbs. If all of that is fine, why is this different? The other camp says this is different. Testosterone is different. It gives these women a competitive edge. And in sports like boxing, it can be outright dangerous. So what's the way out? Well, first I'll tell you what's not the way out. Hate mongering. Imane Khalif was born a biological woman. She has never undergone sex change procedures. In fact, it's illegal in her country. So to call her a man is unacceptable. And so is targeting the entire trans community. Some celebrities have realized this mistake, like professional fighter Logan Paul. He first called Khalif a man. Later, he apologized for spreading misinformation. The same applies to the other side as well. You cannot use ideology to decide this debate. People may identify differently from their assigned gender at birth, but in sports, that alone is not enough. You need to back it up with science. There are so many sports scientists in this world. Bring the best ones together, organize trials and studies, understand the science, and then take a definitive call. You cannot have one set of rules for for the World Boxing Championship and another set for the Olympics. So the governing bodies need to step up here. Their failures led to this controversy in the first place. Now they must resolve it. So sexism is rampant at the Olympics, but that's not all. The Games are known for embarrassing gaffes, and looks like Paris is off to a bad start too. Since the Games opened, here's what the host has done. Wrongly introduced South Korea as North Korea, played the Sudanese anthem in a South Sudan game, hoisted the Olympic flag upside down, and even placed the Olympic rings wrong. This is the world's biggest sporting event, and these blunders do not bode well for Paris. So what are the organizers saying about them? Can Paris avoid more such slip-ups? Our next report tells you.
The South Korean team was excited. Its 143 athletes were waving their flags, floating down the Seine, waiting for their introduction. But it did not go as expected. The announcers did welcome them, but as the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. That's not the name of South Korea. Ironically, it's the official name of North Korea. It was an embarrassing gaffe, and South Korea did not take it well. They launched a strong complaint. They called for a meeting with the Olympic Committee president. After all, who would like to be introduced as their warring neighbor? The Olympic Committee has since apologized, but it wasn't the only faux pas. Looks like Paris is having a hard time getting names and countries right. Look at what happened with South Sudan. It is gunning for Olympic glory, but that run took a nasty turn on Sunday. The men's basketball team was gearing up for the games. They stood for the national anthem, but the organizers played the Sudanese anthem instead of that of South Sudan. It was met with boos from spectators. Soon they realized their mistake. The right anthem was then played, but it wasn't a good look for Paris. The organizers called it a human error, but South Sudan did not let it go easily. The team called it disrespectful. After all, it is the Olympics we're talking about. But Paris is no stranger to controversy. It started right with the opening ceremony, especially this sequence. It was a banquet scene showing drag artists. Many felt it was a parody of the Last Supper painting by Leonardo da Vinci. The famous artwork itself represents a key scene from the Bible.
This was signed off on this.
So it did not go down well with the Catholic Church in France. They called it a mockery of Christianity.
And the reason they're doing this, everyone at home.
But the outrage wasn't just limited to France. Soon it was all over social media. Conservative politicians, far-right groups, and Christian communities slammed the event. It forced the organizers and creative director to apologize.
Am I right? It's disgusting.
And clearly there was never an intention to show disrespect to any religious group. On the contrary, I think that Thomas Joly really tried to really intend to celebrate community tolerance. That was his word yesterday. And looking at the result of the polls that we shared, we believe that this ambition was achieved. If people have taken any offense, we are, of course, really, really sorry.
Our intention was never to be impertinent or to be subversive, as I said earlier. Our idea was simply that with this great diversity, we wanted to collectively include everyone.
The list of blunders goes on. During the ceremony, the Olympic flag was raised upside down. The 5 colored rings of the iconic emblem were also in the wrong positions at one point. Looks like the Olympics are off to a tumultuous start, and Paris has a lot to answer for. After all, this is the biggest sporting event in the world. It must ensure there's no more faux pas. Failure to do so will only undermine the Games.
Now we shift our focus to Nigeria. It is Africa's most populous country, home to over 200 million people, and a lot of those people are angry. Today, after weeks of build-up, protests have begun in Nigeria. The government has been trying to stop them. President Bola Tinubu tried every trick in the book. He increased the minimum wage. His police and military threatened the protesters. He even got the clergy to denounce the protests, but nothing worked. Angry Nigerians took to the streets across the country today, despite numerous obstacles thrown their way. We'll start with the capital, Abuja, where the protesters' movement has been restricted. A court had intervened on the behalf of the government. It confined the protesters to one particular location, to a stadium on the outskirts of the capital. Now, most of the protesters complied, but some were defiant, so they were seen marching towards the heart of the capital, but they were confronted by the police, who fired tear gas shells to disperse the crowd.
Before you go down there, the second one already.
Then there was Lagos, Nigeria's largest city. Again, thousands turned up to protest here. They marched through the streets with banners and posters, wanting to end bad governance and also wanting an end to hunger.
We are tired of being hungry. We cannot even feed our children. One tuber of yam is 5,000. We cannot buy tomato and pepper. Pepper is 1,000. The poor cannot survive. Please, we need you to change the government.
And we are not going to stop until every Nigerian can live comfortably in Nigeria. We are not going to stop until we in Nigeria, we Nigerians living in Nigeria, enjoy similar life or a better life than even countries across the world who don't have half of the resources that we have.
Some of the biggest demonstrations took place in Kano, Nigeria's second largest city, located in the north of the country. Thousands had gathered in Kano to make their voices heard. The Nigerian police fired tear gas and live bullets to scare them away. They also doused the protesters with hot water, but the demonstrators were undeterred. However, things did get ugly in Kano. Some protesters set tires ablaze near the state governor's house. The police shot at them. At least 4 people were wounded. So that's the situation in some of the bigger cities in Nigeria. But the protests are taking place nationwide in some form or the other. They're being organized online under the hashtag End Bad Governance. And the protesters are in it for the long haul, it seems. Look at this post. The protesters have created a list of do's and don'ts. They're telling people to wear comfortable shoes, to carry water and sunscreen and power banks so that their phones are always charged, and they can share videos of police brutality in real time. As you can see, this is an extremely well-organized protest. The demonstrators are determined to bring their government to heel. Why? Because they're angry. Angry about the cost of living crisis in their country. Inflation crossed 34% in June, the worst level in 28 years. Food inflation is even higher. It was above 40% in the month of June. People are struggling to buy food. They're hungry. They want the prices to drop. President Bola Tinubu is being blamed for this inflation. When he came to power last year, he made a number of unpopular changes, or reforms, as he likes to call them. One of these reforms was especially brutal. Tinubu removed a nationwide subsidy on fuel, and this sent prices skyrocketing. Fuel now costs 3 times as much as it did 1 year ago, 3 times higher. And this has had a knock-on effect. You see, when fuel prices rise, everything becomes costlier because you need fuel to transport every single thing. The protesters understand this, which is why their main demand is the restoration of the fuel subsidy. If the subsidy returns, prices are expected to crash and people should be able to afford food again. That's the theory anyway. But will Tinubu listen? We'll find out soon enough. Our next story is from the Maldives. Slowly but steadily, the Maldivian government is changing its tune. Up till a few months ago, they had an anti-India stance, but now it looks like they're trying to shed that image and adopt a friendlier tone. The Maldivian President, Mohamed Muizzu, gave a speech on Friday to commemorate his country's Independence Day. During this speech, he did something quite unexpected. He thanked India. Muizzu expressed his quote-unquote sincere gratitude for India's support to the Maldives and for helping ease their debt repayment burden. And that's not all. Muizzu said that he was negotiating a free trade agreement with India, also a currency swap agreement. So the Maldivian government wants to expand trade ties with India, and that too in local currencies. This is a complete U-turn for Muizzu. He came to power last year on a very different plank. He led what was called an India Out campaign. Some Indian military personnel were stationed in the Maldives to help with maritime rescue and relief operations. Muizzu called them a threat to Maldivian sovereignty. He pushed for their ouster. That was the crux of his India Out campaign. And this campaign won him the presidency. Indo-Maldivian ties have been strained ever since, thanks to a number of Maldivian diplomatic blunders. First, they went after the Indian troops, all of whom have left the Maldives now. They've been replaced by Indian civilians, so not exactly India out, but Indian troops out. The unnecessary drama over this led to diplomatic tensions. It also halted rescue and relief efforts, which only resumed on Friday. So Muizzu caused a diplomatic row and inconvenienced his own people for months. That was the first blunder. Perhaps he could have escaped it unscathed had it not been for some of his vitriolic ministers who were clearly taking a cue from him. They targeted the Indian Prime Minister. At the beginning of this year, Prime Minister Modi was in Lakshadweep, an Indian territory in the Arabian Sea, quite close to the Maldives. Modi was there to promote the islands as a tourism hotspot, but some Maldivian ministers did not like it. They decided to insult the Indian Prime Minister. They abused him on social media, and this sparked outrage in India. Muizzu disciplined those ministers eventually, but the damage had been done by then. A boycott Maldives campaign started in India. A large number of Indians cancelled their trips to the nation, to Maldives. And remember, this is a tourism-dependent country. So the economic fallout was significant for them. The Maldivian economy was already in a precarious position because of the Wuhan virus pandemic and the resultant crash in global tourism. They were just recovering thanks to Indian tourists who were flocking to the Maldives. But Muizzu's ministers ruined it. And the boycott from Indians hit them where it hurt the most, their coffers. In fact, it's one of the reasons why the Maldives is in dire need of debt relief, because tourism, its main money maker, is still in a slump. And while the Indian people are still angry, the Indian government seems to have forgiven Muizzu. Or at the very least, New Delhi is being pragmatic. Muizzu was invited to Prime Minister Modi's swearing-in ceremony last month. It was a show of goodwill. More importantly, India agreed to roll over some debt on a $50 million loan. Repayment was extended by 1 year. That's a rollover of the loan. And the Maldives needed it very much. They're facing a mounting debt burden. Their annual repayments are only going up way more than the country can handle. So the debt relief from India is welcome. But it's only a short-term solution. Eventually, the Maldives needs to earn more money to pay back its massive debt. And that means only one thing: more Indian tourists. Their tourism minister is in India this week to woo Indians. He's launching a promotion drive called Welcome India. Road shows will be held in Delhi, Mumbai and Bengaluru to try and persuade Indians to visit the Maldives again. Clearly, Muizzu has come a long way from India out to Welcome India. It's a textbook example of a U-turn. For our last story tonight, let's talk about obesity. Science calls it a chronic disease. If you're obese, it means you have excess body fat. Some call it a modern-day condition. Others say it has always existed. Globally, 1.1 billion people are obese. That's 14% of the global population. By 2035, that number could rise to 51%. So it's a big problem for the world. But right now, it's an even bigger problem for North Korea. Its leader, Kim Jong-un, is battling obesity. Forget nuclear superpowers. Looks like Kim's biggest struggle is with his weight. Now, North Korea is one of the most secretive countries in the world. It's called the Hermit Kingdom. So you may be wondering, where is this information coming from? Well, it's from an intelligence report released by South Korea's top spy agency. They keep track of every activity in the north, and this is what they chanced upon: Kim's health struggles. Now, some background here. Kim Jong-un was born in 1984, so he's 40 years old. He's around 5 feet 7 inches tall. He weighs around 140 kilos, 140. That puts him in the very severely obese category. In 2021, Kim Jong-un lost some weight, around 20 kilos. He looked visibly slimmer. His face appeared thinner, and this broke hearts across North Korea. People were worried about their leader. They thought he was ill, that he was suffering from some disease. Some even cried at the sight of him. That's not the reaction you would want after a makeover, but Kim did not seem to mind. After all, North Korea is a very different society. It's cut off from the rest of the world. It struggles with a food crisis. Half of its citizens are impoverished. There is rampant malnutrition. So in a country like that, being overweight is a sign of wealth. It's like a status symbol, apparently. And as the country's leader, Kim Jong-un must be a reflection of that. So his weight loss journey did not go down too well with his people. What's worse, it did not even last. Kim gained all his weight back. On top of that, he smokes every day. He's a heavy drinker. He's often under stress. And all of that is now leading to health problems. He apparently has high blood pressure. He's suffering from diabetes. And if this continues, there could be heart problems too. Now, this is a national crisis for Pyongyang. It's also hereditary. Meet Kim Il-sung, the founder of North Korea and the grandfather of the current leader, Kim Jong-un. In 1994, the senior Kim collapsed after a heart attack. All efforts to revive him failed. So his son took the reins of power. That's Kim Jong-il, the current leader's father. In 2011, he too died of a suspected heart attack. So the Kim family has a history of heart diseases, and it has not ended well for them. Officials fear that the latest Kim in power could meet the same fate. So they're scrambling to find new drugs, to procure medicines from abroad. But what if none of it works? What would it mean for the kingdom? That's what North Korea is, where power is transferred from father to son. Kim Jong-un is the third leader from the Kim dynasty. He's still relatively young. He's 40. He was expected to rule for the foreseeable future, but his health is a wild card. So they're zeroing in on a successor, someone who can take over if something were to happen to Kim. And who would that be, the successor? Reports point to this child, Ju-ae. She's Kim Jong-un's daughter. She's around 10 years old. She's been accompanying him to events. North Korean media calls her Kim's most beloved child. And he is said to have other children, but not much is known about them. So right now, Ju-ae is the favorite. She's being groomed to take over, but she's still very young. Imagine a child ruling the kingdom that has been firing missiles and challenging world powers. Sounds absurd, but that's North Korea for you. Nothing is too outlandish for them. As for Kim Jong-un, it shows that even the most formidable leaders are not immune to the trials of the flesh.
Across continents, one powerful news source.
Bringing you diverse perspectives on the issues that matter.
We go beyond the boundaries to give you that little extra about every sporting moment.
So thank you for making Firstpost 5 million strong. We're counting on your support, and you can trust us to bring you the news unfiltered and unvarnished.
Climate change is on our doorstep. It's time for a revolution to take root. And it starts with 1.4 billion Indians. It starts with one tree. One tree for humanity. One tree for Mother Earth. One tree for a future. Project One Tree, a News 18 network initiative.